Let us now summarize the inner voice framework that we have learned today. For working with children, this forms a basis for us to understand why a child behaves in a certain way before making any interventions with the child. This framework is very interesting because most information that is available about the child, which can include history, what is the current state the child is in, what is the behavior, it can all be fit into this one framework. What we learned in this framework was that context begets experience, experience begets thoughts, inner voice begets emotions, and emotions beget behavior. This is a very interesting framework because it can be used back to forth and forth to back also. So, the first component that we have learned today is the context. Context refers to the child's location, living arrangements, and family situation, which is where the primary experience of the child comes from. For example, child being a victim of substance abuse or the family is into substance abuse, child labor, socioeconomic background of the child, trauma faced by the child due to reasons like loss or abuse, child dropping out of school, marital conflict between parents, the child being raised by a single parent, or a chronic illness in the family. Now, the next component of this framework is experience of the child. What the child experiences in a location, living arrangements, family situations, events form the experience of the child. For example, if the child has faced violence in the family, her experience will be that of abuse. It is important to note here that experiences of every child can be different even if the context is the same. To understand more clearly, let's take an example. Let us assume that a child is in a childcare institution. The experiences of this child could be that of care, of physical abuse, or punishment, or even rejection. Every child in the institution might have a different experience as well. It is also very important to note that we must not assume that experiences of every child in the institution is the same. Let us take another example to understand this. In the context of discrimination that the child has faced by the family, the child's experiences can be that of physical neglect, emotional neglect, or punishment, or both, and many other experiences. Let us now come to the most critical component of this framework. It's called the child's inner voice, which means how the child has internalized an experience. Inner voice basically indicates how the child has understood and processed an event. Often, we try to manage the behavior of the child without understanding what the child has internalized from a particular experience. We need to really understand what the child's inner voice is. The thoughts that a child has can be expressed verbally or can be non-verbal. When it is still at a non-verbal stage, as a thought, it is called the inner voice. The inner voice is always understood in first person. Given the background of children from difficult circumstances, they are not able to trust everyone and hence they do not share what they have felt and internalized. Thus, it becomes a responsibility of the functionary to know the child's inner voice. For example, an inner voice of three children who have experienced sexual abuse can be different. While child A's inner voice says, I am powerless, child B's inner voice says, it is my fault. Child C, on the other hand, says, how dare he do this to me? You must have noted that experience of children is the same, but inner voice is different of all three children from the same experience, that is sexual abuse. Now we move to emotions. Emotions refer to a child's feelings or psychological states usually derived from a certain context and experience, which leads to a certain set of internalizations. Let us list out some emotions which are a result of internalizations. The child could be angry, sad, happy, frustrated, jealous, and many more emotions that we have not listed here. If we go back to the inner voices of children who were abused, the emotions of child A are helplessness. Child B is feeling ashamed, while child C is very angry about what happened. So now you see how children can experience different emotions from a same context or experiences. The last component of the framework is the behavior. Behaviors refer to the response to emotions or to the final consequences of context, experience, internalizations, and emotions. Unlike emotions, which are internal in origin and nature and not always observable, behaviors refer to actions that are observable on the outside. For instance, social withdrawal, clinginess, difficulty to sleep, fighting, crying, bullying, not being able to concentrate on studies are all behaviors, and the emotions behind them may be sadness, anxiety, anger, etc. So, you saw all the components of this framework, which is the context that leads to experience, which leads to inner voice, out of which emotions give way to certain behaviors. As we mentioned, the framework is so interesting that it can be used back to forth or forward to back also. You can take up case studies of children and put them into this framework rather than only working on behavioral manifestations of children. Wishing you all the best.